Yo, what is up, everyone? Welcome back to this brand new episode of Hockeytown Rundown. You're here with me, your beautiful host, Zach, with Jake Rivard.
Great to be on, Zach. How's it going?
It's going pretty well, Jake. Thanks for joining me on the show today.
Of course, man. Yeah, it's been a busy off season. So finally getting my feet wet after a couple of years. I'd say putting myself on hockey writing IR. So coming out of retirement's been a little interesting. So some of you might know me from 313 Hockey. We were the number one hockey satire podcast in the world a couple of years ago. My co-host and I both mutually kind of agreed to end the show, and then we went dark for a little bit. So I've decided to come back, do a little bit of independent journalism of my own. I'm covering the team at 313hockey.com. Subscribing is free and always will be. So today, for example, I wrote an article about how Nick Lidstrom is better than Bobby Orr, and I do back it up. So be sure to check that one out.
I second that. I second that as well, Jake. And for those that don't know, where can they find you on all the platforms, everywhere that you're at?
You can find me on your social media of choice at 313hockey. That is with the numbers. And obviously on the website at 313hockey.com. If you subscribe, you will get an email once a week with an article. Share your hottest takes. I want to hear just how crazy you guys get. That's ultimately where we came from. And since then, it's been kind of smooth sailing.
Welcome back to the light. Honestly, it's a pleasure to have you on the show today and be able to speak about Detroit Red Wings as we start ramping up into getting into the regular season. We have training camp coming up. We actually have the prospect tournament that's going to be happening out in Dallas, Texas, actually in a couple weeks here. That's actually in a week. Wow, time is flying by, it seems like now. And then pretty soon we'll have preseason, and then the regular season is here, Jake. And let's go ahead and stop and say thanks for everyone that is stopping by and joining us on this brand new episode. We truly do appreciate it. If you are returning, if you are brand new, we truly do appreciate you stopping by. But if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. If you are watching or listening to us on YouTube, hit that thumbs up button and then hit that notification bell as well. That lets you know when these brand new episodes come out. You can also find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. You can go ahead and rate us 5 stars, hit that follow button. That truly does help us out. Jake, I don't know if you knew this, but you mentioned it with your stuff too. Hitting all that stuff is free. It is free to do.
100%, and it always will be.
So if you guys haven't done that, I know you can do it. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button, hit that follow button and everything else. And then make sure you go and head over to Jake's pages, whether if that's on Twitter or anything else that he writes on. Make sure you hit the follow and subscribe button for him as well. That is free to do. Jake, what do we got in store today? Well, we're going to be touching base on what you noticed from the Detroit Red Wings in their 24-25 season, what you noticed in this offseason, how it's all looking to you as we progress into the 25-26 season, and also some comments about Detroit Red Wings captain Dylan Larkin, who was recently caught at a Detroit Tigers game, touching base with some of the commentators over there, talking about the team and what he's excited for, talking about Pavel Datsyuk and what he mentioned about the team, what he recognizes about the organization and what they might need to do. And then talking about some contract extensions for younger players like Marco Kasper, Simon Edvinsson, and then older players like Alex DeBrincat, as if he's old. All right, Jake, let's go ahead and jump into it. And let's go ahead and touch on what your takeaways were from the 24-25 season. The Detroit Red Wings missed the playoffs once again. You got Snoozy Lalone getting canned as the head coach, bringing in Tom McClellan and a fresh new breath for this Detroit Red Wings team, who actually looked really well after that coaching situation changed. But your overall thoughts on the Detroit Red Wings in 24-25?
So I kind of felt like it was, you ever miss the bus on the way to school?
All the time.
Yeah, so it's like when you're chasing after the bus, and sometimes the bus will slow down to let you on, and other times they'll let you, they're gone. In this instance, I believe that the Red Wings missed the bus. They were chasing it down, and it slowed down for just a little bit, and then they tripped, fell, scraped the knee, and the bus drove off. That is kind of what a microcosm of what wound up happening last season.
Great analogy.
I think that the defense, showed some serious flaws. The fact that we were able to waive Justin Holl twice and not receive any, not even like a single bite, is a big issue. I think it's actually pretty interesting. Andrew Kopp's injury at the end of, I believe it was March. Yeah, I believe it's the end of March. Pretty much sunk their entire hopes of the playoff season. Maybe even before then. I don't know. It was a brutal March. That March just destroyed us. The Centennial Series just didn't work out as planned. I think the biggest thing, and we'll talk about this a little later, is that the team just didn't seem confident. it seemed like every time they would get 1 or 2 goal deficit, they would just fall apart. There was just never really any momentum that would come back. There would never be like a guy who would push them to the next level.
Yeah, and that's been a really big question amongst Red Wings fans is what is the issue within the locker room? Because you have veterans like Patrick Kane on the team. You can include someone like Ben Sherrod or even someone like Dylan Larkin, who is the captain, who has been with some great leaders in the past, like Pavel Datsyuk and Henrik Zetterberg. So who is that supposed to be the burden on their shoulders in that instance? So the team needs someone to get underneath them and help them get back on the clear path that they need to be.
Yeah, I kind of feel like Larkin just feels like he has to do everything on his own, which, for better or worse, I mean, he has had to do that for the last decade or so. There have been multiple games that the Red Wings have won because of him, and there are many where they've lost when he's not been on the ice. I think we're finally getting to a point where he doesn't have to do anything, but I think last season there was a little bit of growing pains into that transition. When you're known as like the guy and then other people are suddenly becoming the guy, it can be a little tough to reckon with that. You don't have to be a superhero all the time, Dylan, if you're listening to this. Also, hi.
Yeah. Hey, if Dylan Larkin is watching or listening to this, thanks for stopping by. We truly do appreciate it. I hope you hit that subscribe button, and I hope to see you pretty soon at a lot of Red Wings games this season. So score lots of goals for us, buddy. But yeah, I mean, and it's pretty interesting too, because that seems like someone that Lucas Raymond is trying to become, someone that can also take some of that burden off of his shoulders. Even on the defensive end, that's Moritz Seider, and now including players like Marco Kasper, who can come out and help out being a legit 2C or someone who can play on the top line, left wing for them, as we've seen this past season. Touch on that. Touch on players like Marco Kasper and what you liked out of them and maybe what you didn't like out of them.
Yeah, so one thing that I did notice last year is a couple times you'd catch like little clips of like Mo Seider like trying to motivate the defense. He was over there talking to them, kind of like trying to get them on the same page. And I think he showed a couple flashes of that leadership. I mean, Team Germany has put him in leadership roles. He's been able, I think he wore an A last season. Correct me if I'm wrong. So like he's clearly like a guy who they're starting to like really trust. I mean, he plays the toughest minutes in the NHL. I've seen a lot of that out of him. What I really liked, though, about Marco Kasper last season, if I had to describe him in a word, he's a dog. Yeah. I mean, he is like the kind of guy who's going to make your life hell in the playoffs. He's a nasty two-way forward. He's got a little bit of that grit to his game. He's the prototypical like Steve Yzerman type player that you want when you're in the postseason. He's kind of like what Tyler Bertuzzi used to do with that sandpaper. But he brings it at a younger level with a little more speed and a little bit more defensive responsibility. I'd be very curious to see how this next year is going to go for him.
I really like that comparison. Marco Kasper is like Tyler Bertuzzi, but plays at the center position. He is all motor, all gas. That kid loves to play hockey, and he's always out there. And I always like to remember back to that very first game that he played in the NHL, and it was against Toronto. And I know that was short-lived, but that's what we saw out of him. And then as it continued throughout his first full NHL season, let's call it, he was doing that through and through every single game, whether if that was on the fourth line where he started, or even all the way at the top on the first line.
And you can notice like a measurable difference. Like after Lalonde was fired and they brought on McLellan, you can see his confidence go up. You can see him playing harder. You can see him leaning into his strengths more than trying to stick to that fundamental style that Lalonde was trying to push. I think they were trying to fit a square hole into a peg, or what's the phrase? A circle into a square peg, something like that. But that's kind of what I think they were trying to do with Kasper. And then McLellan realized like what he's good at and launched him into that role.
It seems like that they did very similar with Albert Johansson, because the Red Wings mid-season, and we don't see Steve Yzerman doing that previously in his tenure, whether that was with Tampa Bay or with the Detroit Red Wings, trading a player mid-season like Olli Maatta to include someone like Albert Johansson more into the mix onto the lineup, who we did eventually see playing in top four roles as well. So touch on him and even someone like Simon Edvinsson.
I really like Albert Johansson because I see him as like the perfect bottom pairing guy.
Yeah.
I think they're probably going to wind up having him play a little bit in a top four role this next season, but he's one of those guys where you don't see him really make mistakes. He can munch minutes if you need him to. You're not going to rely on him to go up against like a Connor McDavid type, but you're going to rely on him to just be another one of those threats where an offensive, another team is dealing with Seider and Edvinsson. They're dealing with the middle pairing, and then they get down to that bottom pairing, and you have a guy like Johansson, and you're like, oh my gosh, I have to deal with him too?
Yeah.
Like, He to me is like another one of those weapons. I believe that he and Edvinsson last season played two of the longest shifts in the history of the NHL. Like they each played like over 3 minutes in one shift. So the fact that he can do those kinds of long, grueling shifts is really impressive.
Yeah, 100%. And I do have a bone to pick with you, Jake, as well, because we did see Albert Johansson shut down Connor McDavid last season, and everyone was hyped about that. So I don't know. I'm going to hold you against that one for sure, buddy.
Mea culpa.
Very good. But no, I really like that you said that too, because I think Albert Johansson is someone who also has that type of motor in him, someone who doesn't really make too many mistakes. And he's not exactly the biggest guy out there, but he plays such a really good defensive game that comes with a little bit of offensive instinct as well. And we have seen that out of him. So can we see a little bit more production out of him, you think, moving into this next season?
I think it's going to ultimately depend on where they deploy him. If they put him on that middle pairing, I think you're going to see him kind of up his numbers a bit. If he's playing that shutdown role on the bottom line, I don't really expect his numbers to leap off the page, but also Albert Johansson's not the kind of guy who, you're trying to prioritize that point production. Edvinsson is the kind of player where you've noticed this throughout his SHL career, his AHL career, and now at the NHL level, he gets better every year. Every single coach he's ever worked under has said he's one of the most coachable players that has ever played, that they've ever worked with. Like, he responds very well to feedback. He adjusts well under pressure. I think he had a very quietly effective season. Like, non-Wings fans didn't really take note of him, but sometimes not noticing the defenseman is for the better. Like Justin Holl was very noticeable. Let's just put two and two together. He was quite noticeable on the ice. Yes. Whereas as Edvinsson, if I talk to I live in Chicago right now. If I talk to a Blackhawks fan, they're going to be like, yeah, I don't know, he was good. But they don't really see those little nuances that he brings to the table. I think we're going to see more of that next season. I think there are going to be a couple highlights where people are going to be like, who is this guy?
Yeah, and I'm curious to ask you, and I'm kind of getting ahead of myself because this is something that we will touch on, and it'll be a question that I'll ask again later on. Because you did mention Albert Johansson, a very good third pair defenseman for the Red Wings. Hopefully for his whole entire career. I would not mind that, but obviously things happen, players go elsewhere, whatever. But Simon Edvinsson, do you view him as a true number one left-handed defenseman?
Right now, I see him being at least the number one left-hand guy for the Wings. I think you could move him down the lineup eventually if somebody else comes in and just really outperforms expectations. But again, I mean, we've only really seen one full season of Edvinsson. He came in 2023-24 and then had his first full campaign this year. I think I would need another year before I can come to a conclusion, but I really like what I see.
That's very interesting that you said it like that, because his contract extension should be coming up and a lot of people are asking about that. Let's go ahead and shift focus over to Detroit Red Wings captain Dylan Larkin, who was recently at a Detroit Tigers game, and he was caught making some comments that, they've started having captain's practices at LCA. He's very excited about the group and a lot of the young guys, and saying that they look pretty impressive so far. And when asked about the team's identity, he says that they're young. Very similar to how the Detroit Tigers were last season and this season. So to you, what's your main takeaway from that as I say those two parts?
So the first thing I noticed is, if for anybody who hasn't ever watched baseball before, or watched the Tigers at all, Jason Benetti is a fantastic interviewer.
He's awesome. He is awesome.
He was able to coax more personality out of Larkin than I've seen out of him probably over the last decade. Larkin was the most relaxed and confident and just easygoing that I've ever seen him on an interview. And during that interview, he made several comments about the youth and how it's a young team and how young guys are going to make a push. To me, there's a couple implications in that phrasing. I think a couple of these signings too kind of suggest to me that there is an implication that, hey, here's a roster spot that is up for grabs. Do you have what it takes to make that step? I mean, like you said earlier, Olimato was moved to make room for Albert Johansson. We've seen Yzerman do these surprise random trades in order to make room for somebody. Robbie Fabry got moved in order to open up a spot for somebody like, say, Marco Kasper. So I think it's ultimately going to depend on how camp goes. But based on Larkin's comments, I think that it's okay to read into that a little bit. Probably a 6 out of 10 on the read into it scale.
Yeah. As I was telling you before we started recording, I listened to it once and I heard that the yeah, the identity of the team, we're young and very similar to the Tigers, and we see what the Tigers are doing now, what they did last season, making that push. And going back and watching it the second time, maybe there is an implication here that Larkin is very hopeful that a lot of these young players, like maybe the Danielsons, the Carter Mazers, where a lot of people have him pegged somewhere in the lineup, if not then in the press box to start this season. You can even call out players like William Wallander, maybe Shai Buyam eventually, or Antituo Misto, the MBN, the sky's the limit, ASP, really so many players that we could call up eventually. But Jake, I want to ask you, who are the players that you foresee cracking the lineup, whether that's opening night or at some point throughout the season? Who do you think actually makes the most impact on the team?
This is not somebody who I would want or who I think will make the roster this year, but I don't know if you've caught that Anton Johansson goal. He was a fourth rounder taken in 2022.
I did see that earlier.
Oh my gosh, like that. There's another guy where he's one of the best defensive prospects that the Wings have, I think. But going back to your question, what I've noticed with Yzerman is that he has a little bit of trend of graduating players from the minors to the majors. Every year, it seems like two players jump into the fold. So we had Kasper and Johansson this last season. We had Elmer Soderblom and Simon Edvinsson 2 years ago. We've had Raymond and Seider do it. Berggren and, well, rest in peace, Philip Zadina. We had like...
You can toss Molino in there. Oh, well.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's always like a big trend every year of these two rookies making that push. So my guess this time around would be, I don't know, I have a couple names written down. So like last year, Carter Mazer only played like a couple shifts in a game, but he was doing so well in the AHL that he made the call up. He was, I don't know, great in his shift and a half. Obviously, he got hurt and his season came to an end. I could see Mazer having a big comeback. Nate Danielson had a great preseason last year to the point where a lot of people thought he was going to make the leap. And I mean, he almost did, but obviously that didn't wind up happening. And then obviously the hot name of Axel Sandin-Pellikka seems more like a when than an if next season. Whether he starts now or sometime in December is anyone's guess, but he's looked good. He's looked as good as Mo Seider and Simon Edvinsson did in the SHL. I mean, he was breaking goal records for under 20 defensemen.
Yep.
He gets compared a lot to like, and I know this is like very, very premature to say, but he gets compared to Erik Karlsson quite a bit too. They have very similar play styles. They're very offensively gifted. I mean, shoot, if he winds up becoming an Erik Karlsson, I won't complain.
Now, with you saying that, and I agree, I want him to be Erik Karlsson too. I want him to put up over 100-point seasons as well. Now, would you say that is proportionately a good reason why the Detroit Red Wings feel that maybe it's better development for him to stay with Grand Rapids and learn better defense than maybe what Erik Karlsson did? But do you think the Red Wings are trying to do something like that to where it doesn't turn into a full-blown Erik Karlsson?
Well, I feel like the Red Wings have this like track record of just over ripening their prospects. They usually give them like a year more than they need or 2 years more than they need. So unless they like really wow somebody in preseason camp, I remember like Jeff Blashill said the only way Lucas Raymond would make the roster is if his wife was impressed. And then sure enough, everybody's like, hey, is your wife impressed? And he's like, well, yeah, of course he's making the roster. I think we need that kind of performance out of him, out of ASP, if he's going to make the roster this next year. Do I see it happening? Maybe. I think, yeah, like I said, I think it's just really going to depend on how he adjusts to North American ice. There's a lot less to work with out here. It's a lot tighter spaces. Sometimes it takes Swedish players or European players a little bit longer to transition.
Yeah, and a question to ask here too is because looking over on Puckpedia, the defending pairings right now that they have is Ben Sherratt with Mo Seider, Simon Edvinsson, Albert Johansson, Erik Gustafsson, Travis Hamonic, and then in the press box you have Bernard Docker and Justin Hall, just talking about the forward as well, Austin Watson. So Carter Mazer isn't even on here. Do you believe right now, as of right now, we haven't seen him yet, but we'll see in training camp pretty soon here, but do you believe ASP's defense is better than Gustafsson, Hamonic, Bernard Docker, or Justin Hall currently at this point in time?
I think honestly we're going to see JBD take that spot, Jacob Bernard Docker over Travis Hamonic. I think Hamonic is going to wind up being that like 7D, maybe the first call up from the AHL if it really comes down to it. Like I said, I mean, it's going to ultimately come down to how they want to structure the contracts and how they want to deal with these inevitable extensions.
Yeah.
I think they might give him a cup of coffee if he really impresses during the preseason. Maybe they'll do like a 9-game performance, see how he does. Obviously, if he plays more than 9 games, they burn 1 year of his ELC. And then I know there are quite a few players that are up for new deals in 2 years. So do we really want to tack ASP onto that? Or are they going? I hope that he gives the Wings no choice but to let him play.
Yeah.
And we've seen flashes of him being able to do that. So time will tell. I know that's not a great answer.
No, and that's exactly right. And the reason why I asked that is because we know what kind of offensive instinct and prowess that ASP can bring for this team, right? But what would the team want to utilize him the most if they were to bring him up? Would it be for the goal scoring? And that's why I asked, is this defensive play better than those players I named currently?
Exactly. Yeah. I'm trying to think off the top of my head, like, what is the closest thing to an offensive defenseman the Wings have right now? They had Shane Gostisbehere for a while, and he performed that role quite well, but I don't think they've been able to replace that drought. I mean, they ended the season with, I believe it was a negative 23 goal differential. Like, adding secondary scoring, it should be a priority for them. I'm not sure if the signings this offseason really helped with that, but I mean, if they need all the help they can get, that's the exact kind of guy you would want quarterbacking a power play. Maybe they'll start him on the second power play unit, see if he can put in a little extra effort there, see if he can cook. Yeah, I mean, if I'm Steve Yzerman, I'm giving him every opportunity I can to cement that middle pairing role, because they don't really have a good middle pairing. Who did you say it was again? They had Edvinsson Johansson, I believe, for Puckpedia.
As the second pair, correct.
Yeah, and I remember they did like a Edvinsson Cider first pairing last year, kind of near the end, and that worked pretty well. They had good chemistry together. But after that, I mean, if you run with that sort of scheme, that's a pretty top-heavy defense. After they're done, I mean, second pairing is what, at best, Johansson and Sherratt. I like Johansson, but I don't know if Sherratt has what it takes to take on those big minutes anymore.
Right. Exactly. No, I agree with you. And I really liked that you brought that up, that this offseason, it didn't really seem like that you added much goal scoring to this team, because I would agree with you. And I really didn't think about this until now, and I've kind of mentioned it, and I think Carlo has as well. And maybe many of you Red Wings fans as well that are watching and listening, tuning into this episode. Thank you once again for joining us on this episode. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and follow Jake on all of his platforms as well. Find him over on Twitter. Is that they really upgraded the defense. They wanted the defense to be better. They wanted less goals to go into their own nets. And I think in return, they're hoping that players like, and I'm not saying James Van Riemsdyk or Mason Appleton, because those are two of the forwards that they brought in. Lucas Raymond can have a more of an impact. Can he score more? Can Alex DeBrincat actually break into 40 goals? How much more of an impact can Marco Kasper have? Elmer Soderblom, Andrew Kopp, can he have a resurging season? What are your thoughts on that real quick, Jake?
So the one thing I've noticed with this pro scouting department is they really like two different kinds of guys. They like a defensively responsible two-way guy. So like Andrew Kopp, JT Compher, Mason Appleton now. And then for defense, they like really big guy who could probably hit hard. So, and munch minutes. So you've got like Ben Sherratt, Jeff Petrie, even Justin Hole's pretty tall. I think he's like 6'3", but they like those two kinds of guys, and those are always the two guys that they go for.
Even someone like Elmer Soderblom, because we have these younger players, Alex DeBrincat getting closer to 40 goals.
I think it's really going to depend on where they deploy Kasper next season. Whether they play him as the second line center, or if they move him to the wing and put Kopp up on the second line. Personally, I think that Kasper showed what he can do at the center level. I know the Wings are a little bit more hesitant to let a young guy take over the center role. Like, remember how long it took for Michael Rasmussen to finally get to play center, and then by the time he did, they were kind of meh on it. I think that's going to affect how the offense shakes up. Kopp, to me, is a defensive center. He is at his best when he can play in a grinding role or in a shutdown sort of role, which is why when you play him with somebody like, say, Patrick Kane or Alex DeBrincat, their numbers suffer. They become defensively better, but they also lose out on a lot of the goal and point production. So I think that if you're going to play an Andrew Kopp type, you just need to build a shutdown line. You need to do like a Kopp, Compher, and Appleton. These guys are not going to show up on the points chart at all, but they are going to be your best PK unit. They're going to be the guys that are going to just sort of make life's hell for a lot of the scoring lines of these visiting teams. But I think the biggest thing they need to do is just play to their strengths, and that's why I think Kopp could have a bounce back season as long as they don't expect him to be this like 60 to 70 point guy, of which he has never been and will not be.
Right.
I think we just need to temper our expectations with these kinds of players.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with you. We don't have, maybe Lucas Raymond can be that guy. Alex DeBrincat, he's obviously a really good sniper for this team. Patrick Kane is very lethal with his shot too and his playmaking ability, but maybe there is room for growth in someone like Marco Kasper. Maybe he can put up the 20 goals for us. What's your thoughts on the top line? Because right now on Puckpedia, they have James Van Riemsdyk up there. I'm not sure what your full expectations are for that top left line spot, but to me personally, Jake, I think that's the spot this season that is going to be the rotated spot unless someone officially says, no, that's mine, I'm taking that. And right now, I think it's a swap out between three players. That's James Van Riemsdyk, Elmer Soderblom, and Jonathan Berggren. Maybe sometimes Michael Rasmussen here and there. Who knows? But out of those four, but mainly those three that I mentioned, I think that those are the three prime candidates that are going to be rotating in and out of that top left line spot.
Completely agree with you with it being a rotational thing. I do not think that James Van Riemsdyk's name is written in pen. I think this is going to be a penciled in one left wing. I think even Alex DeBrincat could see a couple times up there. He's been, that Cat, Larkin, Raymond line has happened a few times. Yeah, I think that is one of the things they had to address is getting a top six forward. I think Steve Yzerman's checklist this offseason should have been improving the goaltending, which he succeeded at, but getting a better top six forward, which I personally don't see James Van Riemsdyk as a top six forward at this point. At best, he's a middle six guy.
Mm-hmm.
And getting a middle pairing defenseman, which, again, I don't think Jacob Bernard-Docker is a middle pairing defenseman. He's shown throughout his last few years that he is a bottom pairing guy. There's nothing wrong with that, but those needs are still there. Shoot, maybe Nate Danielson makes the push. Maybe Carter Mazur. I think Carter Mazur would actually be a great candidate for that first line left wing position.
Yeah.
Make him the proto Tyler Bertuzzi again, or Bertuzzi 2.0. Have him get acclimated to the pace of the NHL. Make him sort of a hellraiser, the kind of guy who's just going to wear down other teams.
And that's been my biggest question, Jake. And I love that you brought that up because I do believe that the offseason last season, 24-25 offseason, before that season started, a lot of people are saying Nate Danielson sure does look hella good out of training camp. I would not be surprised if he actually made the opening night roster. Granted, he didn't. Marco Kasper gets called up one game afterwards because of an injury. So how do players like Nate Danielson and Carter Mazur make this lineup? Let's say it's not on opening night, but how do they make it without injuries? And who on this roster currently, maybe it's James Van Riemsdyk, maybe it's Elmer Soderblom, maybe it's Jonathan Berggren. Who do you see the odd men being out? I know I'm asking you a lot of questions and they're all back to back, and I'll repeat these if I need to, but do you foresee Steve Yzerman making more mid-season trades, or do you think it's all purely going to come based off of injuries?
I think that not only are you going to have to, if you are a rookie that has not made your NHL debut yet, or maybe you've played one or two games, I think not only are you going to have to show that you have what it takes at the NHL level, you have to show that you are better than the players that are currently plugged into the roster. That has always been the Wings' philosophy, and we've seen that over the last few years. I think that there is a much better chance of a defenseman making the roster than somebody on offense. I think that you could pretty confidently say that there might be a prospect or two that could outdo the likes of like Travis Hamonic or Jacob Bernard-Docker, Justin Holl. I mean, obviously that is like, I hate to rag on a couple of this style of play, but I think there's a lot more opportunity there. As far as forwards go, I mean, we almost saw Nate Danielson make it last season. Like you said, we've seen Carter Mazur make his debut. I think that there is a lot of opportunity. I think you just have to kind of, I don't know, you have to really, really convince them, like overwhelmingly, that you are the guy that can get the job done. And as far as odd men out go, Berggren, probably. I mean, they talked all offseason and during the trade deadline about shipping him out, or at least there were rumors that he was going to be shipped out. Soderblom I see being like a serviceable middle six guy, but I think you could easily convince me that Nate Danielson could take over his role. I don't know. Those are sort of my like general thoughts.
Earlier, Jake, you did bring up the goaltending on how they brought in John Gibson. How much of a difference do you believe someone like John Gibson can bring to this team? Granted, he is 32 years old. He's got 2 more years left on his $6.4 million contract. In exchange for someone replacing Peter Mrazek, coming in and essentially being the starter over Cam Talbot. Overall thoughts and opinions on a John Gibson, Jake?
I think that John Gibson was the best possible goaltender available right now. And the fact that they got him is a huge win. I honestly was expecting him to go to Edmonton last season. And I think had he gone, they probably would have won the Stanley Cup. Really, the only thing that was holding Edmonton back is their goaltending. I mean, that's consistently been a trend for them for 2 seasons in a row now. And the fact that they still haven't addressed that should set off some alarm bells. Yeah, I think that Gibson is the best possible option they could have had, save for, throwing Kosa into the fire.
Mm-hmm.
I think at 32, he's already played some of the best hockey he's ever played. So expecting him to be that like bona fide elite top 10 goaltender is it's a tall order. Believe me, this comes as much of a shock to you as it does me. The Red Wings have a better defense than the Ducks. So I think that he's going to rest a lot easier now than he did there. I mean, they had like compared to what the Red Wings have right now versus what the Ducks have dealt with over the last few years, Gibson's going to be in a lot better hands.
Yeah, no, I 100% would agree with you on that. I really hope that he can play in 50 plus games. That would be my starting expectation. If he doesn't hit that, it's fine. Cam Talbot obviously has to make up for that, and I think Cam Talbot will be great. But do you foresee it to be like a 1A, 1B situation, Jake, moving forward into this season, or do you think John Gibson handles most of the reins?
I think John Gibson's probably going to, barring like a slump, because goaltenders, I swear, I think goaltenders might be the most unpredictable position in any sport besides maybe pitching in baseball. Like you really can't tell. I mean, a guy like a couple years ago, Alex Nedeljkovic looked like a legit starter. Now he's back to his backup role. Peter Mrazek, there was a point in time when he was with the Wings where people were like, oh my God, this is the next like Dominik Hasek type player. And then he fell off pretty hard. So I would say barring any sort of like step back or slump, I see it being like an 80-20 split. I see Gibson taking on the lion's share of the starts, and then occasionally you'll have Talbot filling in the blanks. Maybe you'll even get a Kosa call-up if Talbot doesn't live up to expectations. After all, Talbot's pretty old now too, isn't he?
Yeah, Talbot, he's at his age 38 right now. I'm not sure if his birthday is still upcoming or not.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so he's pretty old as well. So at some point in time, I mean, and we've seen the Red Wings, they've had their slew of goaltending injuries as well. So I for sure see an instance where Kosa is going to get some playing time, but they got to be able to, I guess, shifting focus over to Kosa, another prospect in the Red Wings pipeline that needs to see more NHL action. He's only had 1 game. I mean, I would like to see more of a couple stints out of him and just to see what exactly we got. And I don't want to judge him just based off of if we did give him 8 games, let's say, right? And let's say his goals against is over a 3.0 and his save percentage is just a 901 or just underneath that. I don't want to judge him based off of that because he's only 22 himself. So he's still just as young.
And the thing is with Kosa is that every single time he's kind of like the opposite of Edvinsson, where Edvinsson gets better every year. Kosa has 1 year when he first joins where he's just bad.
Yep.
When he first joined the AHL, he was so bad he got sent down to the ECHL until he started to play so elite that he made his way up to the AHL. I think what's going to happen is if he gets his call up or if he makes his debut, he's not going to do too hot right off the bat. I think he's going to struggle with consistency. And I don't know if you noticed this about some online Wings fans. They tend to not react very well to that sort of thing. So I imagine what Yzerman is doing right now with Kosa is just making sure that he is like 150% ready to make that push. But I'm still a Kosa believer. I'm still a truther. A lot of goalies, I think Igor Shesterkin of the Rangers didn't get started until he was 24. Connor Hellebuck didn't get started until he was 23 or 24. Sergei Bobrovsky didn't get started until later. Like, goalies take a lot more time than any of these other positions. So patience is really key. And I know that sucks to say for anybody who's been watching this rebuild for close to a decade now, but I would rather them take their time and make something good than have to deal with, trying to rush something, turning into a Buffalo or, God forbid, the New York Rangers.
Yeah, no kidding. Oh my goodness. And that's kind of what I always tend to go towards is that I know that a lot of Red Wings fans, they're very hypercritical on this rebuild and that it's taking a lot of time. It's almost been 10 years. I totally get that, but it could be the Buffalo Sabres where you get all these nice shiny toys and then you're not able to do anything with them when the time comes and you need them to perform their best in the playoffs because they just can't reach it. That's where I don't want the Red Wings to be. And we're not quite there yet because I love that you also mentioned that the Red Wings defense is better than the Ducks defense, kind of going back to John Gibson and talk about the goaltending. I think this goaltending is going to make a huge difference. I think adding the someone like Mason Appleton to help out the PK, which our PK was really bad. The whole forward group as a whole, granted, we might not score a lot of goals compared to some other teams. I think our overall defensive play will be a lot better. We're going to be able to not allow as many goals in the net. And so I guess my question to ask you, Jake, with all that mumbling and rumbling that I just went on with there, is do you foresee this team being a playoff team if everything was to go right?
You know what? I think it's really going to come down to two major factors. The first one being 1-goal games. So a couple years ago when the Wings were 1 point out of the playoffs, I think they had so many 1-goal games go the wrong way that it wound up costing them, the trip to the dance. Last season, they had the kind of a similar trend. I think based on what you were saying about like the offense not really taking much of a step, but the defense being improved is probably going to have a very similar trend. You're going to want to hope that obviously that they win more of those 1-goal games than they lose. And if that happens, I see them making a legit push closer to the playoffs. The other factor, though, is something that's completely out of the Wings' control. I think that ultimately the Atlantic Division is going to depend, that wildcard 2 spot is going to depend on if or when the Habs regress next year. So last year, they had a pretty unsustainably high shooting percentage. I want to say it was like a 21% shooting percentage, which is just like 10 to 15% higher than the league average. I think it was 10%. But their microstats showed like weaker defense. They had a very similar goal differential to the Red Wings. So I think it's going to really depend on, if Lane Hudson continues at the pace that he does, if Ivan Demidov becomes the guy that we were told he's going to be. Are a lot of these, is Noah Dobson going to actually be a good signing? Or is this team going to take a step back, kind of regress a little bit, and then launch themselves back into relevance the following season?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that because Carlo and I on the last episode that we did, if you guys haven't checked out that episode, please go ahead and check it out. We did a Eastern Conference rankings of all the teams in the Metro and the Atlantic, and we're getting scolded by a lot of Habs fans for putting them behind the Detroit Red Wings. I even put the Sens in front of us. I think that's a no-brainer. I think you could easily do that.
I think
they pretty much dummy us every single time we play them, which is very unfortunate to say, but they are the Walmart version of the Florida Panthers. You guys are just rough, rugged team that is built for playoff hockey, where the Habs... the Habs are completely different. I think that they're meant for goal scoring, but can their defense keep up with the other team as well? And I think the Red Wings can pound that into them. And we talked about the veteran leadership too, that they kind of lack on there versus what the Red Wings have as well.
I'm just going to say this right now. The Sens are just the reheated nachos of the Panthers. And that's not hateful. That's not meant to be negative anyway. I show up on several Sens podcasts here and there, but they are... kind of like a boneless or diet Florida Panthers.
Yeah.
I think the Habs, it's really going to just come down to, whether all those young guys take the next step. If Patrick Laine can actually make a comeback. If, Kirby Doc, is he going to be able to come back from injury and be like a better player? Like, there are just so many like what ifs for the Habs right now. Like Sam Montembeault, is he actually a legit starting goaltender? Like, until you answer those questions, until you square that circle, there's really like that second wildcard spot is completely up for grabs.
Yeah, 100%. We would agree with you with that. One final question on this roster. Do you foresee, this could just be yes or no, you don't have to be too elaborate on this, but do you foresee either Andrew Kopp or JT Compher at any point getting traded? Because those are probably one of the two names or two of the names on this roster that Red Wings fans would probably like to move because of obvious reasons.
I think if one of them is going to move, it will probably be Kopp. He's been showing up in a lot of rumors as well and whispers of trade potential. I believe the Colorado Avalanche mentioned their interest in him, so we'll see.
Well, if Chicago Blackhawks are interested, they can have JT Compher. It's homeland.
We'll take Connor Bedard. Thank you.
Please. Let's go ahead and focus over to some extensions that are going to be upcoming here. And one of the bigger names for the Detroit Red Wings is he's able to sign an extension. Actually, I believe right now would be Simon Edvinsson, the 6'6" defenseman who's 209 pounds. He's 22 years old, out of Sweden, the former sixth overall pick in the 2021 draft. This past season, he put up 31 points for 7 goals, 24 assists, and 78 games played. In his career, he has played in 103 games with 35 points, 10 goals, 25 assists. What are you looking for in extension in someone like Simon Edvinsson? And I know that I asked you earlier, do you view him as a true number one defenseman on the Detroit Red Wings? We just saw someone like Keandre Miller in the open market, almost the open market. He was technically an RFA, but he just earned 7.5 AAV for his 8-year deal. Then you look at someone like Brock Faber, who's closer to Simon Edvinsson's age, getting $8.5 million extension. You can even throw in like someone like Noah Dobson, the most recent who we saw take on a really big contract as well. His AAV is $9.5 million. Do we foresee the length being as long? Do we see a bridge deal, or how high can we go because of the salary cap increase?
So it's funny you mentioned the bridge, because I believe there are sort of two schools of thought you can go at with Edvinsson. If you really do believe he is that legit number one guy, you need to lock him up for as long as possible on the cheapest deal you possibly can. You mentioned Keandre Miller and Brock Faber, and I think those are really great comps for what you're going to be looking at. I think that Noah Dobson is going to be a little bit too high of an ask. I think that he, the fact that he's older and he's had a few more NHL seasons under his belt is probably what justifies that contract. But if you're going for like a long-term deal, yeah, I could see anywhere from 7 to 8 mil a year going to Edvinsson. I think at most you're going to lean probably towards like a 7.75, maybe 8. That Brock Faber deal is a very good comp as well. But the other school of thought is if you don't believe that he's the number one guy, or do you believe that he hasn't quite proven that yet, in which case you could do a bridge deal. You could do something short-term, maybe not Bowen Byram short-term, but I believe that like a 3-year, 6.25 mil or 6.5 mil a year deal could really work well for him. I think it just ultimately depends on how he does this year and how they deploy him. I could see a contract happening. I could see Yzerman wanting to get the contract done sooner in order to save a little bit of cash, but I could see Edvinsson kind of taking his time a bit and showing like, hey, I've got the stuff.
Yeah, and that's kind of the similar situation that's the same route that Moritz Seider and Lucas Raymond went as well, right? Neither of them signed mid-season. As time goes on, those contracts, they just look better and better, Jake. I think you can agree with me on that, and I think a lot of people also would as well.
Oh, I believe The Athletic actually ranked Lucas Raymond's contract as like one of the 10 best in the NHL.
Yeah, see, exactly. And that's a guy who just put up a lot of points. He put up 30 plus goals for us as well. Simon Edvinsson, actually, lucky for him, that CBA technically doesn't take into effect for a long time. So there's still plenty of time for him to lock in that 8-year deal versus a 7-year deal. What are the odds that Simon Edvinsson commands as much as Moritz Seider currently gets?
I think that's going to depend on how he does next season, but I don't see him commanding that much given the fact that Seider won a Calder.
Yeah.
And that Seider, I mean, the advanced analytics just show that he plays the toughest minutes in the NHL, like tougher than just about, I believe it's harder than any other player in the league. So I think that's where Seider can justify those numbers. I don't think that Edvinsson is at the level where he could do that yet, though.
I like where your head's at. I think if you can lock him in anywhere from that, 6.5 to at most $8 million range, I think that's the most I would like to give someone like him, especially if it is a longer term deal. But obviously I want to see what he can do this season. Maybe he can put up a couple more points, but that's not what I'm looking for. I want to see how much more can your defensive game improve and allow less goals to go into our net. Moving over to Marco Kasper, granted, he won't need his contract for, I believe it's a couple more years, just 2 more years. But this is a player who just saw his first full season in the NHL, 77 games played, 37 points for 19 goals, 18 assists. His career is 78 games played. We did mention that, how he got injured during that game against Toronto. But just talking about some of the contracts that have recently signed, I mean, Marco Rossi signed a bridge deal for 3 years at $5 million AEV, which I think for the Minnesota Wild is quite a steal. I think Marco Rossi is going to be a fantastic player for him. That was someone that was in the rumor mill all offseason until they finally locked him up. But some other names too is Logan Stankoven, who's 22 years old, signed an 8-year deal at $6 million. And then Frank Nazar as well, 7 years with the Chicago Blackhawks, who had an unreal ending to his season. He put up a lot of points, but is it a little premature to be offering someone who hasn't even technically played a full season, giving him $6.6 million per season for the next 7 years, Jake?
You know, what's interesting is Elliot Friedman actually mentioned that Frank Nazar has a record. He has played the fewest amount of games in the NHL to earn a contract extension of that length. So he played 56 games before getting that 7-year deal.
Wow, I mean, for Chicago Blackhawks, I mean, that's gambling. I mean, that's a good gamble though that they have to take, and sometimes teams have to take those types of risk and gambles. But do you think the Red Wings are in a situation like that to do something with Marco Kasper?
At this point, I kind of think they'd be a fool not to. Obviously, there are some downsides to those long-term deals. I mean, look at Jesperi Kotkaniemi of the Carolina Hurricanes. He signed an 8-year deal at a very young age, and he just has not really lived up to that at any level. Right. But Kasper's shown a lot more consistency in his game than Kotkaniemi ever has. Truly believe he kind of commands anywhere from the 6 to 7 mil range. I think if he's smart, he holds out until the end of the season before they start the extension talks. I think that that's probably going to be the angle he goes for. But if I'm Steve Yzerman, I'm trying to lock down that deal for as low as I can and as long as I can, because this guy looks ready to take that next big leap. This guy is, I would comfortably say that Marco Kasper is a better player than Frank Nazar. I haven't looked at any Logan Stankoven stats or anything like that or watched much of his tape, but I've seen a couple, I live in Chicago. I've caught a couple games and I've seen Nazar play. And Nazar's got a little bit more of that offensive touch, but Kasper's better on both ends of the ice and he's more physical.
You can even throw in someone like a Wyatt Johnson who has a 5-year contract, ends in 2029, making, what is that? If I'm reading that right, $8.4 million per year. What are the odd chances that a Marco Kasper just has one hell of a crazy year and the Detroit Red Wings have to offer him more than what the Detroit Red Wings captain currently makes, Dylan Larkin?
I doubt they'll do that. like right off the bat, I could tell you right now, I don't really foresee Yzerman giving anybody anything more than the captain yet. Yeah. Now, we'll get to Alex DeBrincat, and I believe that he will command a higher salary than what Larkin's making right now, but that's a whole other discussion. Obviously, the salary cap is going up very soon, so I could see a lot of those numbers being fairly negligible. But if I'm Steve Yzerman, I'm aiming 8 years, 6.3 to 6.5 mil a year. If I'm Marco Kasper, I'm aiming for 7.
Yeah, and we're not looking for points, and obviously we want to see more points come out of him. And in order to get that kind of number, I think you have to start outproducing, and he pretty much did already this past season. He outproduced like the Andrew Cobbs and the JT Compher's who make 5 mil plus for both of them. So I would agree with you that starting with a Marco Kasper, especially if you wanted to lock him up long term or even for a short term deal, I bet you can give him a 3x6, which would be fine. But if I'm going to lock him up long term, and if he's willing to go closer to 7, I'll give him a 7x7, especially if after this upcoming season, if he puts up a 50-point campaign, especially at that number 2 center spot. When was the last time we actually had a true number 2 center, Jake?
Pavel Datsyuk, maybe.
So I'm willing to make that risky bet on Marco Kasper. And maybe eventually too, we got to see what Nate Danielson offers. Maybe Nate Danielson can be that guy as well, and then we can push Marco Kasper up to the left wing. But I'm okay with either option right there. And I love that you brought up Alex DeBrincat, because this is the reason why I wanted to talk about Alex DeBrincat. Bench Rates on Twitter said that Kempe is looking for a deal in the $10 million range for 8 years, while the Kings started talks under $9 million. That was a comment made by David Pagnotta. Adrian Kempe had an $8.7 to $8.9 million power score in 22-25, which turns into $10.5 to $12 million with a $113.5 million cap hit. So if he keeps this up, his next deal could be $10 million plus on the market. So we decided to quote tweet that with Adrian Kempe's numbers and Alex DeBrincat numbers. And in their careers, Adrian Kempe in 630 games has put up 194 goals and 207 assists for 401 points. But for Alex DeBrincat in 614 games, has 253 goals, 257 assists for 510 points. So that's 16 less games than Adrian Kempe. So if Adrian Kempe gets $10 million or more, And what does Alex DeBrincat get, Jake?
I would say, yeah, I'd say 10 mil is fairly reasonable, but I think it's really going to depend on term. Like, do you really see Steve Yzerman signing DeBrincat well into his mid 30s at 10 mil a year? Is the salary cap increase going to help, alleviate some of that burden as he approaches the tail end of his career? I don't know, but whether they sign him or let him go, like that's going to leave a massive void on the roster from a top goal scorer. We've tried to fill this void before with Anthony Mantha, which didn't work. Jacob Verana, which definitely did not work. And DeBrincat's the closest thing we've had to it. So if I'm Yzerman, I'm locking down DeBrincat for ideally somewhere in the 9 to 10 range. But if you want to keep him long term, like it is unfortunately going to cost you. That is sort of the cost of doing business with an NHL team.
Part of me does believe, though, that there is an instance where Alex DeBrincat would actually take a pay cut and maybe takes a contract in terms of number wise, the AEV, very similar to what Larkin makes, maybe a little bit more than what Raymond does. I'm not sure, but I definitely could see a world around there. And the fact that he loves Michigan, probably wants to stay here. I think he absolutely loves the state, is willing to take that sort of pay cut. But I wouldn't blame him if he wanted to make more money because he has absolute every right to do that. He's a former 40 goal scorer, consistent 30 goal scorer as well. The kid can play hockey.
I will say it's important to note that he has family roots here, like you mentioned. He just had a kid. The kid is friends with Patrick Kane's kid. Like they're hanging out all the time. They've clearly got like a life set up here. So I think it would be a lot harder to pry him away from the Detroit market. So maybe you're right. Maybe you're onto something here.
Me being the fan as well, too, Jake, just kind of spitballing here. What are the odd chances that the Red Wings, hey, kitty, Pats can join the podcast,
this is Jimmy.
Too. Yeah. Hey.
Yep. Anytime he hears me talking into a mic, he's like, I need to be on here too. So the fact that he made a guest appearance on the pod is sort of like an inevitability. So come here, you. So for everybody who hasn't met him, this is Jimmy, not named after Jimmy Howard. Say hi.
Yeah. So one thing about Alex DeBrincat, just me being the fan of me is that I look at some of the prospects as well as, and then I can't say for certain that any prospect is currently, or at least on the winger side, is on the same level of par or expectation that we can hopefully foresee in the future being quite like an Alex DeBrincat. However, with that being said as well, we have so many young players that can play on the wing, like a Buchelnikov we eventually have to see, MBN. We have Kiskinen as well. Who knows what we were going to do with Amadeus Lombardi, and there's plenty of other wingers within our system. We mentioned Carter Mazer as well. So do you foresee an instance where the Detroit Red Wings might be interested in trading in Alex DeBrincat?
I think that a lot of things would need to go wrong if they were to trade DeBrincat. There would need to be a complete collapse. There would need to be I don't know how much you've paid attention to the New York Rangers over the last couple of years, but they had what I would call a complete collapse last season.
Yeah,
to the point where, the captain was making public comments about the coach. The coach was talking about the lack of effort on the ice. Everything that could have gone wrong went wrong, and I think barring something like that, I don't really foresee much of a DeBrincat trade.
I see all these young prospects. It's probably more likely that we trade some of the younger prospects over someone like Alex DeBrincat, considering we already know what he is, what he can do for this team, what's his ceiling, what's his floor. So I would agree with you that something terribly would have to go wrong in order to be in that situation. But it does come down to how long, like you mentioned, how long of an extension do we want to give someone to Alex DeBrincat, And last time that we wanted to sign Alex DeBrincat, he was trying to go closer to that 6 to 8 year range. We only gave him the 4. So maybe now's the time to say, well, here's your 8-year deal just with another 4 years with the Detroit Red Wings. That'll take him until he's about 32, 33 years old, which would probably be
I
more
wouldn't mind that at all.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, 100%. So you would prefer the 4-year deal over a 7-year deal with an Alex DeBrincat?
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, with a guy at his age, you want to lock up as many of those prime years as you can. I think it would be a bit of a tougher pill to swallow from the DeBrincat camp, but it's entirely possible. You did bring up an interesting point, though. The Wings really don't have a sniper or bona fide goal scorer in the prospect pool. For the most part, you've got those playoff performers like a Carter Bear or a Nate Danielson, but you don't really have the guy you can rely on to like snipe a good power play goal or something like that.
That we know of, yeah. And we hope that that's someone like Buchelnikov, maybe that's someone like MBN. We got to see what he looks like in a full season with the Grand Rapids Griffins as well. I think that's going to be very exciting. And also, we got to wait for someone like Jesse Kiskinen to make his North America debut as well. So there's a lot of excitement there. And I love that you brought up Carter Bear as well, because we had Michael Devellano on, a former Everett Silvertip scout, and he had nothing but high praise for someone like Carter Bear. So I'm very excited to see what he could bring over to the Detroit Red Wings and also for Grand Rapids. And I would foresee him actually playing with them in the playoffs this upcoming year. I'm very excited to see what he could do this upcoming season, for sure. So talking about Pavel Datsyuk too, let's go ahead and shift focus over to some of his comments in the recent article that you read, Jake. So go ahead and touch on that real quick.
Yeah, I think ultimately really what this team lacks is confidence. Pavel Datsyuk actually just did a recent interview. I'll actually read one of his quotes. The Red Wings were at the top for a long time, winning so many titles, so it's understandable that their rebuild is taking more time than usual. They say a rebuild takes about 7 years, but since Detroit was so high up, the road back to the top takes even longer. Now Detroit has a great arena, which is already a big plus. Perhaps what the team lacks is standout leaders. But that's not true only for Detroit, it applies to hockey in general. Players are maturing more slowly these days, and some never mature at all. The other line that he mentioned actually is related to Steve Yzerman is, let me find it. Yeah. They asked him if he could give any advice to Dylan Larkin, and he said, "It's hard to give advice when I haven't seen him in 10 years. I played with him when he was still very young, and a lot of time has passed. He stands out now, already an experienced and mature player. He understands everything. But as a team, they probably just lack confidence." And I think that to me kind of brings home the entire point that we've had over this last year. They have the talent. They have the ability to dominate. We've seen them perform admirably against some of the toughest teams in the league. But those 1 to 2 goal game leads, whenever they lose one, they just fall apart. They're just not a confident team. And I think that's what they really need is that like adrenaline surge of confidence.
Yeah, and that seems to have been the case ever since the departure of David Perron, who kind of was that energizer bunny for the team, who told the young guys, and much like Dylan Larkin mentioned that we said earlier too, that he views this team as young and that's their identity. So can Dylan Larkin become that guy that embodies a David Perron, or is that someone else within this team? Maybe James Van Riemsdyk is now that guy, or maybe Mason Appleton, who knows? I mean, it sounds like from what Winnipeg Jets fans said, Mason Appleton was a really good locker room guy. So we're just going to have to wait and see. But I would agree with what Pavel Datsyuk said, that, it comes with maturing. A lot of these guys, they're still so young that, granted, they could speak really well, but maturity on the ice, how do they play their game? And I think that's kind of what Pavel Datsyuk mostly meant, not in terms of their character overall as people.
I agree. Yeah, I like the thought of James Van Riemsdyk being a leader. I mean, he's consistently been a leader throughout the majority of his career, and it'd be good to have a good unk in our roster.
Well, and to him too, I mean, similar to maybe like Patrick Kane, both them being the first and the second overall pick in their respective draft classes in that same year, is that both of them from the get-go always had high expectations set onto them. And so for those veteran leaders to help these young guys understand the league and the intricacies of, don't burn yourself out, take a rest day, do this instead of that, that's going to help out these young guys. And I guess even correlating it back to where we think that the Red Wings are, I think that's kind of what separates them from the Montreal Canadiens a little bit, is that they don't really have too many of those guys that can help separate those emotions or those feelings or those days that they do need to rest.
Yeah, I think a lot of people just don't understand too that like hockey is played just as much off the ice as it is on. There are things that happen that we don't know about that can affect things. I mean, people often go back to the Jake Wallman trade. Like, we have no idea what caused that trade to happen. Obviously, on paper, it is a brutal trade. Yeah. But none of us have that insider track on what's been going on. So, like, who's to say what could have happened? I think it's better to not speculate on it, though.
No, 100%. But I will say, talking about personal lives, I will say this will be my hot take. Dylan Larkin has one hell of a year because now he's finally a dad. And a girl dad at that, I should say. So I think
he's going to cook.
Yeah, thank you. Yes.
I think whenever a guy gets married or has a kid, they're going to go off.
It's
So
that
if you're a
season.
Lions fan, Sam Laporta just got married, so I
Okay.
expect a big year out of him.
All right, Jake. I don't think I got anything else. You got anything else? But I think this is a good point where we can go ahead and wrap it up and stick to our final thoughts on what maybe your expectations are this upcoming season. Maybe your final takes, your hot takes, until the next time that we have you on. Maybe it's mid-season or something.
That'd be great. Yeah, I'd love to jump by. I'd say my biggest three takeaways are it's going to depend on those 1-goal games, whether or not the Wings make the playoffs. You're going to see Andrew Kopp performing a lot better with, readjusted expectations. And we're probably going to see a couple of games of Justin Holl. Fortunately, I think we're going to get probably 15 to 25 games out of him.
You just tore the hearts out of every Red Wings fan's chest by saying that, Jake. How dare you?
You have no idea how bad that hurt.
Yeah, no, I think that's great stuff. And once again, I definitely appreciate you stopping on and recording with me and doing this episode. Once again, let the people know where they can find you, who you are, and all the fun stuff that you're doing upcoming as well.
Yeah, you can find me and my cat Jimmy, 313hockey.com. I am available on all social media outlets at 313hockey as well. I don't post as much as I'd like on Instagram or Facebook, so I should probably get better at that. But yeah, feel free to drop by 313hockey.com, drop your email in the subscribe button, and I hope to be sending you some great articles soon. Please go on the Nick Lidstrom is better than Bobby Orr piece and just agree with everything I have to say.
Go
If
ahead
you
and
don't agree with all of my opinions, by the way, are correct. And if you don't agree, you will in a couple years.
No, please go ahead and follow Jake on all of his platforms. Go ahead and find all of his articles and comment on those and let him know all the great work that he does, that you thoroughly enjoy it. Because I do. I love reading all your stuff, Jake, and I love having you on the show. Once again, I would love to have you on mid-season at some point and talk about what we've seen from the Red Wings so far versus what we talked about today on this episode. But in that meantime, as well, we want to stop and say thanks for joining us once again on this brand new episode. If you are returning, if you are brand new, thanks for making it to the tail end of this episode. I know it's a long time for you guys. I know you guys got all this TikTok brain and stuff. I'm not going to leave that part in this episode, but we definitely appreciate you guys stopping by. And as always, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, hit the thumbs up, hit that notification bell that lets you know when these brand new episodes come out on YouTube. And if you're over on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, you can rate us the 5 stars and hit that follow button. And until next time, we'll see y'all on the next one. See ya. I love you. Bye.